Afternoon. We recently binge-watched a TV series that was a courtroom drama set in another country. During the trial, when a witness came up to testify, they gave an oath that went something along the lines of, "I will not speak out of hatred or fear." Now, I don't know if that's actually what they swear when they testify in that country, but that line struck me. I will not speak out of hatred or fear. Now, whether you're in a courtroom or not, that's good advice. Because words spoken in anger and fear are often words that we come to regret. And that's true not only for words, but for attitudes. Fear and anger cloud our judgment. They lead us to react to situations and to people rather than thinking through in order to come up with a good solution. When we act or speak out of anger or fear, we're using what they call our reptilian brain, that most primitive part of our brain. And in doing so, we ignore our higher thought processes that the human brain is capable of. In other words, hatred or fear leads us to engage in knee-jerk reactions for self-preservation, rather than thoughtful consideration for what is the best course of action. Now, we can see times when we have acted or spoken out of hatred or fear in ourselves pretty easily after the fact, when we take time to reflect upon it. You might be able to recall a time yourself when you spoke to someone in anger, but later, when your head was clearer, you realized that what you said only made the situation worse. Now, you might not be willing to admit that to the other person or even to yourself, but part of you knows that it's true. The same thing is true out of fear. Sometimes we act in certain ways to protect ourselves in order to help ourselves feel safer. Later, we might realize that there was no reason to be afraid, or that your fear reaction didn't solve the problem, but might have created a new one. That is why in Psalm 37 we hear the words, "Refrain from anger and turn from wrath. Do not fret." In other words, don't be afraid. It leads only to evil. Anger and fretting lead to evil. We find something similar in Ephesians chapter 4, where Paul writes, "In your anger, do not sin." Now, it's not easy for us to heed these words, even though they make sense and we think, yeah, that's right. We shouldn't act or speak out of anger or fear. But we live in a culture and as a society that encourages hatred or fear. And the reason for that is simple. Fear and anger are powerful motivators. If you're trying to get people to do something or to agree with something, get them angry or get them afraid, and then they'll sign up with you. That's why political parties and political figures use fear and anger to get people to support them. That's why many marketing and advertising campaigns use fear and anger to get you to buy your products. Because if I can get you angry enough at other people, no matter how you define who those other people are, then I can steer you to act in the way that I want you to act. And if I make you so afraid of something terrible that might happen, you're more likely to buy what you think will protect you and keep you safe. When we act or speak out of anger or fear, we fail to recognize what would otherwise be obvious. Unfortunately, this problem is a bit more insidious. When we make a decision out of fear or anger, we will then seek to justify that decision even when our fear and anger subside. It's not the case that later on, after we've said or done something in fear or anger, we say, "Oh, let me retract that. Let me back away from it." Because like I said earlier, we don't want to admit to ourselves, let alone admit to anyone else, that we made that mistake. Psychologists call this the confirmation bias. You seek evidence and logic to support or confirm what you already believe, rather than looking at all the facts to test to see if perhaps maybe you need to adjust your position. So that's the problem we have. We act or we speak out of fear and anger, And then later, even when we're thinking more clearly or able to think more clearly, because we have made that speech or action out of fear and anger, we stick with it. Now, we're human. We can't help but to act or speak out of anger and fear at times. But the question is, what will you do when you realize that's what you've done? Do you have the humility to admit that perhaps you weren't thinking clearly and maybe you need to go a different direction? The antidote to both anger and fear is simple: love. As Proverbs 10 tells us, hatred stirs up conflict, but love covers over all wrongs. And 1 John chapter 4 tells us, perfect love drives out fear. So let us seek in all situations to seek love, to seek the love of Jesus Christ, the love that overcomes fear, the love that covers over the wrongs that hatred stirs up. Let us seek the love of God. Let it cover us and fill our very being. Would you pray with me, please? Lord, on the one hand, we are grateful that you've given us the emotions of fear and anger, because there are times when they are useful and they protect us. But forgive us, Lord, for the times when we do speak out of hatred or when we speak out of fear. And then, after having done so, we try to justify the fact that this is what we've done. We pray for our nation, Lord, a nation in which fear and anger seems to drive so many people to do or to say whatever they do or say. Instead, Lord, may your love fill the world. May your love fill our hearts, so that as we are guided by your Spirit, we may be the people who act and speak as you desire. Amen. Thanks for joining me. We'll talk again later.